In his new book about long-termism, What We Owe the Future, the philosopher William McCaskill argues that concern for the long-term future should be a key moral priority of our time. There are three central claims that justify this view. Future people matter. There could be a lot of them. We can make their lives go better. I'll begin the discussion today with Stephen Smith and Larry Clements. I've been thinking about this a lot, and I kind of want to hear what you guys have how you think this applies to you, and how this might change if it does change some of the way you formulate arguments about politics or environmental issues or whatever it might be. So, Steve, you any thoughts on this? It's kind of open-ended tonight.
Okay. Yeah, I have thought about it some. He did open up a big concept there of the very large number of people who might succeed us, over millennia or longer periods of time. And I thought the way he identified what are the problems that we should work on, the ones that are crucial, that really have a big long-lasting impact, and is it something that we could work on? And if it is, then we ought to try to address the problem. Thought the ones he identified were good, but the more I thought about it, I said, I think I would want to work on those problems anyway, without thinking many, many thousands of years in the future. I think about my grandkids. I'd like to see decarbonization, being sure that weapons of mass destruction, biological or nuclear, don't, get out and do terrible things. The problems identified that might affect the future, they're also going to affect the pretty near-term future. If they're big enough, and we should be trying to work in our politics and our lives to address those problems. I'm not sure that it's going to be an important enough selling point that this could have impact thousands of years from now. If I'm trying to persuade somebody, I think I want to say it can affect my grandkids and your grandkids.
Yeah, I've heard that in reference to environmental issues, that even if the Earth is not warming, steps to eliminate carbon emissions it's still a good thing to do.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's difficult to counter those who want to put economic arguments ahead of that. Larry, what's
well, just to
I've
build on,
been distracted this week, but
yeah, build on Steve's point. I agree totally that the key to making this a successful initiative is to keep it relevant to the most number of people, and that tends to be in the relative near term. It might be your grandchildren, but it might be in the next 100 years. And marketing this is the thing that's going to help us survive, and giving people realistic images of what it is that's going to take to get there, and what the alternatives are. I think that we have to really look at sort of human nature as well. Human nature is we don't have a lot of experience. The Greek scholars and Shakespeare's and all those folks, had a really profound impact and a great perspective. But for everyday people, it tends not to be. And if you go on the internet and look at just this as long-termism as a concept, and you see what people are starting to write about it, you see that they're taking off on these quadrillion years, and this exploring other galaxies and spreading throughout the universe, and those kind of concepts, and they're essentially ridiculing them. And I just don't think that we need. That's not a good. Not a good marketing plan to put it out there in the sense that of time frames that people can't really relate to. It can't get personal for them.
Yeah.
You know, we haven't you know, the march toward the societies that we have today has been slow and gradual. And I think we've gotten ourselves to a point where there needs to be some change that is more aggressive and more radical. And I don't think that we're going to get there if we leave ourselves open to people just identifying this with things that are not palatable or relatable.
Mm-hmm.
You know, climate change, nuclear proliferation, even the AI and the biodiversity, what's it called? The
Bioengineering.
bioengineering, you know, are things that are real, you know, they're real time here. And, you know, the challenges that, you know, we're dealing with nation states and getting those people to come together and not try to take an advantage of one over the other is the real challenge that we have.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that I've always come back to is the idea that an idea, you know, a new philosophy, a new way of viewing things, is not proliferated immediately to everyone. There are still people, I'm sure, around the world who don't know that the world is round, that the sun is the center of the solar system, that the knowledge has not reached everyone. So whatever new concept you come up with, it's going to take a long time to put that idea out and to gain acceptance. And then that's compounded by another thing, which is we have been throughout human history, we've been motivated by one factor in our development, and that is growth. It's the only thing that we use to measure progress. Is, you know, if you start a business, it's not a successful business until it grows and grows and grows. If you're, you know, if you have a small farm, you want a bigger. The model that we have for success is always predicated upon growth. And I see the same thing going on now, that we're looking at the economy in the United States, and we still talk about growing the number of jobs, growing the number of factories, and continuing to grow. And as long as we have that growth model as the prime mover, we're never going to achieve a balance. And you mentioned Bill Maher. I was watching one of his episodes the other night, and he talked about the fact that this year we're going to see the 8 billionth person born on Earth. So we'll have a population of 8 billion this year. Now, I remember back in the 70s when it was 2.5 billion. So we have this huge growth in population. That is not a good thing. We should be reducing our population, not increasing it. But how do you get that idea across to people whose vision is always, well, I'm gonna marry and have a family, and I'm gonna have kids? And, you know, I did. That was the thing that you did, and that was seen as a very positive thing, even to the extent that I know when we were growing up, people who had 8 or 9 kids were applauded. Boy, that's they used to call the good Catholic family. You got a whole.
What else do you do with your time?
Yeah, well, a whole litter of kids. Well, the problems that we're having are due to the fact that we have 4 times as many of us as we did when I was born. Right. Those people are responsible, not individually, but collectively, are responsible for the pollution, for the waste, the problems with shortages, with global warming. Everything that is happening to us is because of our increase in population. Now, if we don't stop that, if we don't change the trend line on that and start reducing the population, we can double the population by 2050 or so, because you have it's geometric progression basically. And that's, I think, is the thing that we could do to reduce the problems for the future is to put in a new ethos of let's stabilize the population. That this used to be a big issue. It used to be the thing, zero population growth, and the Toffler books from the 70s. It was all about the population explosion, and we seem to have forgotten it because it already exploded. Yeah. So that's my take. He doesn't talk a lot about that in the book, but I think until the mindset changes, I don't know what we can do.
Well, it really relates back to the economics as well, because as you said, the progress of the economic aspects of civilization have been predicated on more and more people extracting more and more resources,
Right.
and creating more and more things. And we've reached that point, as you said, that it's not feasible to keep doing that.
And in our economy, if you just look at the demographics of just the U.S., with the baby boomers all retiring and there not being enough young people to support the baby boomers, it's going to put a strain on the economy. So if you could reduce the population by getting rid of old people, or a drain on the economy, things would work. But it's a hard nut to crack.
There are countries out there that are seeing population decline, and they're worried. Japan is one of them. They're worried about how they're going to maintain their economic status and economic power.
Yeah,
one solution is to redistribute them. If we need more people here, we can just go import them.
No.
Let them import themselves.
Yeah, the ones that we're importing are younger, so that helps our problem.
Right.
So we're not as in bad a shape as Japan, who aren't importing anybody.
Well, they only want to report. They don't only want to import Japanese people.
Yeah.
Which I think sometimes from some of those islands, it would be like, bringing in an immigrant as far as moving from one of the islands to another.
Well, I think that's reflective. Can we envision a world where the population stabilizes at a sustainable level? I mean, what should the population of the Earth be? And how do we get to that point? When we talk about the future, that's probably the most important question. We can cope with the technology, the diseases, all the other issues, but unless we figure out a way to stabilize the population, we're going to continue to have, mass migrations and starvation and all that. A lot of people see the problem and they say, well, the answer is we need to produce more food, and we need to grow and grow to support all those people. And I don't see that as the answer. I see, let's reduce the population, and it's we could do it in 50 years if we made a concerted effort. They tried this in China in a very very harsh way of telling families they could only have one child. And while I didn't approve of their methodology, I thought they were on the right. They were thinking of the right goal in reducing, stabilizing population. I know
they backed out on that.
Yeah, they did. They've bought into our model.
Well, it's the demographics thing. The fact that in China they have, like we have, a whole bunch of people that are getting older that need to be supported,
right? And
there's not enough young people to do it.
Well, they've done the same thing that we did, though. They took, we had at the beginning of the 20th century, we had a majority of the people in the country living, if not on subsistence farms, at least on in rural areas where they, primarily, took care of themselves. And what we've done is move them all into cities where we're dependent upon somebody else to grow our food, et cetera. And China has done that in a huge way. The number of cities that are now in the over 1 million and sometimes over 10 million is increasing every decade. They've got hundreds of cities, cities the size of Louisville, certainly, probably a lot larger than that. And eventually you run up against the wall, don't you? you, you can't sustain that. You can't continue to grow forever. So I know it's like when Al Gore said it's an inconvenient truth, referring to global warming. This is an inconvenient truth as well. It's not something we like to think about, but it's right there, right in front of us. So anyway, I don't want to belabor that point. Anything else in this that's striking you? I was mentioning to Steve before. I've not gotten hold of the book, but apparently it's quite popular because there's an 18-week wait at the library to get the online version. But later on, he talks about assessing the end of the world, and he was trying to postulate what's going to be good or bad. And throughout my adult life, I've seen a lot of post-apocalyptic films and literature, and most of the time the future doesn't look very good. Most of the time the future looks pretty harsh. But one of the things that inspired me, and it may seem trivial, but one of the most inspirational things was Star Trek. I think Roddenberry was a futurist, thinker, and he kind of painted a picture of what the future could be, and what they did out in space was not the most interesting thing to me. What they did on Earth was the most interesting. In some of the episodes, they talked about how the Earth reorganized, and they did achieve a stable, supportable, sustainable environment. And I don't know, is that something that had an impact on either of you?
Well, I remember that those episodes, the Earth went through a period of nuclear war and eugenics.
Yeah.
Ricardo Montalban was playing this Superman who had been put to sleep, and he awoke several centuries later. And and they thinking about bioengineering. Where do we stand on the cusp of that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The path was not an easy one,
right.
But the ultimate, I guess the ultimate thing was the Earth united when you realized there were other people in the neighborhood you had to be concerned about. The war always unites the. But back to the question, how would I sell this concept to folks who are more concerned about their day-to-day existence, and perhaps would look at something like long-termism and say, well, that's that's pie in the sky, that's ridiculous, I can't worry about it. How do you go about trying to break the egg on this?
I think I'd go back to is it a problem or our attention? I guess I wouldn't try to persuade them with long-termism. I think it's a valuable moral concept, and I think valid to say we owe the future generations, some consideration, and we should try to make things better. But I think if you're just talking about trying to address a problem, let's just take global warming. You want to address global warming, what you want to do is say, is it a big enough problem that it's going to affect all of us? Yes, it's seeming every day more and more you see evidence that it's a bigger and bigger problem that's affecting all of us. Okay, is there something we can do about it? Yes, there are things we can do about it. So what can we together do about it? Well, let's stop burning some things because we're putting too much carbon into the atmosphere. And, we can't just stop right now, we know, but what's the plan? Let's have a plan that goes beyond a 2-year congressional term or a 4-year
Mhm.
presidential term, and let's get this plan in place. Did you hear about California saying that by 2035, any new
Yeah.
car state has to be electric?
Yeah.
That's a plan.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes, I hear arguments to the contrary on that. However, that you're switching to a fuel that pollutes less, but you're requiring a lot of lithium for batteries. You're requiring a lot of electricity production, and so it's a trade-off. But
Mhm.
I think you're right about setting the plan. It's easier to get to an agreement if you're talking about something out in the future. You're not talking about this quarter.
Well, if you can see there's a way to get there, that
Yeah.
you're not going to pull the rug out from under you immediately, but we're going to have to make changes.
Mhm.
I think any of those problems he's talking about, there needs to be consensus building, agreement that this is a problem we should work on. We probably aren't going to get the right solution to begin with, but that's one of the things about problem solving. You try something else, keep trying. Persistence.
Mhm. What about on a local level? Are we getting back to our local environment? I saw something on the news this week about a proposal for a hotel in Portland. Someone wants to build a boutique hotel, 22nd Street, and um, in discussing it, it was like this is a place where growth could have a very positive effect. It's so there's some things that apparently someone has a vision of taking an area that is economically somewhat depressed and infusing some capital into it to create something positive. And I wondered, we've had a couple of plans here in the past. We had something called Cornerstone 2020. I don't know if either of you remember that, but that was something proposed back in just after 2000. And they did a lot of surveys. I don't know if it's Chamber of Commerce or some group had put together this study, and they were asking people what they wanted. What essentially, what do you want your future to look like? And I was struck by the fact that when they described a neighborhood, they described a neighborhood that sounded like where I live. It was not someplace far away. They talked about being able to walk to places that you needed and having parks nearby and that kind of thing. And yet, even though people said this is what we want, what we end up with is something different. So that vision it's not, you not only have to create it, but you have to make it something that everybody can understand. I guess in our lifetime, the most forward-looking plan that was actualized was the Apollo mission. We said Kennedy says we're going to get to the moon within a decade, and some people thought he was crazy, but everybody bought into it, and we did it. So there has to be something that you have to have a good plan, but you have to sell that idea. And I wondered locally, Larry, what would you like to see?
Well,
What kind of community you want to leave for your grandkids?
I think on the local level, I think that's an excellent place to start because the politics I think tend to be a little more malleable. And it's still a challenge to keep it going on a long-term basis. And local leaders tend to look at things on more of a local basis, where they can make decisions that are more likely to be in the face of to actually get things done. I think that one of the things that has held back the climate change issue nationwide and perhaps worldwide is the politicization of it. It's become something that everyone seems to have an opinion on, as opposed to it being a fact. And if you can bring that down to a local level, and you can look at the things that this local level needs and what they could bring, and how they can, all these local all these local cities compete with other cities for jobs, for industry, and for recognition. And I think that is a place where there's real potential.
Steve, you think it's possible to sell a vision of, I won't say a finished Louisville, but imagine our community growing not in numbers of people or buildings or whatever, but growing in quality to become the kind of place that we really want it to be. What does that look like to you? What should we be aspiring to have? Does that kind of question make sense? I mean, that's what I always want to ask politicians, instead of, well, we're going to get jobs and we're going to do this and that. Now, wait a minute, where are you going? What is it that you want to have when you're all done?
Yeah, no, I think it makes sense, and I think there are the many aspects that we're familiar with. The natural environment, the safe water, safe streets, your education, culture, your entertainment, whatever the businesses that have the jobs, are treating their employees well. There's all the issues that do come up in politics. It's a little hard to describe it for one and have it to everybody. I think there's going to be more than one view about what are the most important pieces, but it's hard, I think, for most people to put all that into one vision. It's you sort of know if you see it, and you see parts of the city that you don't like, and I'm not just talking about just structures, but the way it works, and parts that you do like, and I don't know how you put it all together. I'm a little at a loss, I guess.
Yeah. Do you think a vision like I'm describing of an idyllic sort of community, do you think that's possible within a democracy? I think that's an issue that's coming up more and more. There are people who envision, a beautiful community like you might have in Saudi Arabia, where things are controlled and structured, and I'm sure they won't allow certain things that we have to tolerate because they have a very oppressive government. We can't forget what the Nazi view of world was going to be like. It seems as though when we try to think of how we can create the kind of society we want, we have to take freedom away from people. And for me, the question is, can we persuade people to freely choose things that are in the collective best interest? Or that's an argument now that they say democracy is just too slow. We can't go through all of these machinations and the corruption of politics in order to come up with solutions. And I don't. Is it possible?
That I think you also run into what Heather Cox Richardson described in her book, where you have people who believe that if some aspect of society is benefit, then it takes away from them.
Mhm.
and it's you know, it's all a zero-sum game, and you
Yeah.
know, I think it's a really very, you know, live issue, and it is a question of whether democracies can rise to the occasion. Unfortunately, the alternative is autocracy, which tend to be uh, totally self-serving and don't rise to the occasion, and you know, and suppress, you know, legitimate freedoms as well. So it's a tough thing to negotiate around.
Yeah.
We are running out of time.
Mhm.
Mhm. Yeah. I find that it's interesting you bring up her Richardson's book. I think that the difference in a lot of ways between the urban and rural view of America is still that independent, that cowboy spirit she talks about. That you know, I don't need to cooperate. I don't need government. I don't need to have other people. I can do this all on my own, and that that fact is simply not true. That there is no more wilderness. There is no more untamed area. And so you're forcing people to realize that the way they think about things either has to change or they have to get rid of the people who disagree with them. So there isn't a whole lot of, you know, either I change the way I think about you know, freedom, or I get rid of the people who are threatening my freedom. That's what I'm most fearful of. But where I struggle is articulating that clear vision in a way that could be sold to people, that they would understand it. You know, I guess that's I don't know. It's a perennial problem. I'm sure that's what the guy in Nazareth a couple thousand years ago faced. He was preaching a line that people didn't, you know, they didn't buy it. They didn't understand what.
Right.
Uh,
I think that's Charles Booker's problem,
yeah, yeah,
trying to link the you know, the hood to the holler.
yeah.
And you know, basically, it's the same situation. People that are ignored but believe that the other side is going to get over on them.
Yeah. Mm. Well, I don't know that we can solve that one, but I don't know if you'd like to go further with this. I think I'd kind of like to move to some other topics in the future. I'm sorry that we couldn't hear from Stan or Dave tonight, but um, I would like to have you guys suggest topics. My interest is more in current events. One of the things we used to do here is talk about the stories of the week and you know how these are being covered in different ways by different media sources, but it doesn't have to be that. So between now and next time, if there's something you would like to address, I'd be very interested. I really enjoy doing this. I enjoy talking with you guys and trying to do it in a fairly structured way so it doesn't just become a you know a jam session. But I don't want to be the one always picking the topic. So if you have something you're interested in, if there's an article, perhaps a TED talk or a video or something that inspires a thought that you'd like to get some comments on, please just forward it to everybody and we can decide what to do. And
Okay.
I'm going to send this recording out to Dave and Stan. I think Stan will be back with us next time. So we'll see where we go from there. Okay.
Very good.
Sounds good.